Hello there and welcome. In the previous episode, we added the option to save into a JSON file. We also learned how to encrypt and decrypt this JSON file so it will be more secure. Right now, we still have a few things missing before we can finish working on the saving system. I know it's been a few episodes, but I really want to cover all of these things before we continue to other things. I don't want to come back to the saving system in the future. Maybe only if we need to save new things. But I do want to finish it, so it will take maybe this episode and one more episode to finish all the things that I planned. In this episode, we are going to finish working on the UI of the saving and loading. We want to create slots, so this way we can select a slot and then we're going to have multiple saving files instead of just one. And then we also want to be able to load from these files. So we are going to finish the UI, and in the next episode, which will be the last episode for the saving system, we are going to see how to save all the other things that we still did not save. Right now, we are saving the position of the player, the stats, but there's a lot of other things that we still need to save. For example, the content of the inventory, things that we picked up from the world and we don't want them to appear again when we load the game. So there will always be new things to add to the saving system, because when we add new things, quests and things like that, we always need to make sure that we are saving the data, so when we load it, it will still be the way it was before. First of all, we want to be able to click on this Save Game menu, and then it will open up a Save Game submenu. So we already have this over here. We can see this Save Game menu. So let's open it and let's close the menu. So now we only have this. Of course, we also want to disable the canvas because we don't want all these things that don't belong here. Now we can also change the font to be a bit smaller. And we're going to click on the Save Game menu and we're going to add a UI button Text Mesh Pro. Next, we're going to make it a bit bigger. For me, it will be something like 1050 on 200, something like that. For you, it may be different. And then we're going to change the background of this button. So I'm going to select this asset, this name bar tree, and that's something that we already used. So we have this UI element in our project from before. Now we're going to rename this button and we're going to name it Save Slot. Inside, we're going to click on the text and we're going to rename the button over here to empty, and the font will be white. So now we can see that it's empty over here. Next, we also want to increase the size of the button. So we are going to make it about 50. And the other thing that we want to do is when we click on this save slot, we want to change the highlighted color. So this is the color that is going to appear when we just hover over this slot. So we're going to change it to be something like for CF118. And the alpha will be about 203. Now we can add more things into the save slot. For example, we can add some kind of screenshot of the game when we save the game, right? We can see a small screenshot of the landscape, and it's something that we can actually do, but I'm not going to go deep into all of this. So if you want to learn how to do it, you can just find it by yourself, and there shouldn't be a problem. There's actually different ways to save the screenshot in Unity, and then we're simply going to display it over here. But I'm going to keep it simple for this tutorial. We're simply going to save the date of the save file and maybe give it a simple name. And you can add whatever you want later. Now we're going to click on this save slot and we're going to add a component, which will be a new script, and we're going to name it save slot. So let's see what is going on over here. First of all, we have a button and we have the text of our button, and it's a Text Mesh Pro UGUI because it's not a regular button, it's a Text Mesh Pro button. Then we also have an int for the slot number because we're going to have several slots. Then inside the awake, we are simply getting the references for the button and for this button text. And in the start, we're creating an on-click event when we press on this button. So when we press on this slot, we want to save into the slot. So first we check if the slot is empty, because if it's not empty, then we want to display a warning that something is already saved inside the slot, right? We don't want to erase what is inside the slot. So we're going to display some kind of UI that will warn the player and tell him that if he continues, it will override the data that is already saved inside this slot. But if it's not empty, then we're going to actually save into this slot. We're creating a date time object, and then we can simply get the time right now, the time of the saving. And we save it inside this DT, and then we also format the time into this format. So you can change the format if you don't like it, but we're going to display the year, the month, the day, and the hour. So this will be the format for the time. And then we're simply going to set the text of this button to be saved game number 1, for example, and the time. And you're going to see how it looks like. After this is done, we're going to deselect this button because when we click on a button, it will be selected and it will cause us different problems later on. So we don't need to keep it selected after we saved. We simply want to click on the button, save the data, and then we want to deselect the button. So in order to deselect it, we're simply creating a reference to our event system, and then we're finding this event system, and we go into the event system and we simply set the selected object to be null. So if this button was selected, we're simply going to set it to be null. So now nothing is selected inside our scene. And for this method, for this isSlotEmpty, for now we're going to always return true, but later we're going to change it. So let's see how it looks like. Right now we're still not saving and we're still not displaying any UI for the warning, but it should get the time and it should set the text. So we're going to save this. And now when we click on this slot, it says saved game 0 and the date of this moment that I'm recording this video. So we can see that we got the date and we set the text. But at this moment, nothing is actually saved, nothing is actually working, but this is the beginning. Now we will go into our save manager and we're going to create another region. So let's collapse all these regions. Let's close all of this and this and this. And at the bottom, we're going to create a new region. So let's copy this and also and region, and we're going to name it utility. So these are going to be different useful methods that we can use, and they don't have to be specific to the binary or to the JSON. So we're going to do something like that. We're going to create a method that will simply check if the file already exists. Because if we want to save into file number 0, we first need to check if there's already a file that is named save file 0. So we're going to have a method public bool does file exists, and it's going to receive an integer with the slot number. And we basically want to check if there's already a file for this slot number. So inside we're going to check if we are saving to JSON, right? Because we want to know if we're saving it to a JSON file. So we're going to check the JSON path. And if we're saving into the binary, we want to check the binary path because the files will be in different paths. So if we are saving into a JSON, we want to check if system IO file exists, and we want to provide it with the JSON path. So we're basically checking if there's a file inside this path. Else, we're going to do something. And then if we're not saving into a JSON but into a binary, so else, we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to provide it with the binary path. And both of these paths we can find at the top. We created them in the previous episodes and we also set them. So the JSON path project is some kind of location, and then we have this savegame.json file, and for the binary path we have another location, and we have this save_game.bin. So these are different locations for the different types of files, and we need to provide both of these paths because we want to check if there's a file inside these paths. But of course, this way we cannot save multiple files because it will always come to this one file. So we're going to separate between these paths, and we're not going to save the name to be hard-coded with the rest of the directory. So first of all, we're going to have a string named file name, and it's going to be save game. So this will be something that is going to be shared for the binary and for the JSON. And over here, we're simply deleting these parts of the path. So we're going to delete this, and also this. Actually, instead of this slash, we can put this because it's the same thing. This path, all directory separator, is exactly the same as this slash that you see over here. So we can simply delete this and paste it over here. And now we're not hard coding the name of the files, but we have the name of the file over here. And then inside this check over here and this check over here, we're going to do something else. We're going to provide it with the path, right? And then we are also going to add the file name, and we're going to add the slot number, and at the end we're going to have this .json. So all of this will be basically what we had over here, but we also add the slot number between the JSON and the file name. So it will be this directory, right? Some kind of directory, save game 1 JSON. And then if we send another slot number, it will be save game 2 or save game 0 like we saw before, right? Save game 0.json. So this way we can actually have multiple different files. So each time we check if there's a file inside this location. If it's the 0 slot number, it will check if this file exists. If it's the first slot, it will check this one. So this way, we don't have to hard code it. And we're going to do the same over here, but this time we're going to add the file name as well, the slot number, and because it's saving into a bin file, it's going to be .bin. And over here, it's pretty simple. We are simply going to return true or false, depending on if this file exists or not. So return true, right? Because if this file exists, it's going to return true. And this entire method is going to return this Boolean. And then if it doesn't exist, it's going to return a false. And the same thing over here. So this is just a utility method that is going to help us when we want to check if there's already a file named something.json or something.bin. So let's save this. Let's go into the save slot file and let's add the logic inside this is slot empty because we want to check if the slot is empty or not. So instead of this, we're going to add if save manager instance, and now we're going to use this utility method that we created. So does file exist, and we're going to pass in the slot number. So also here we need to pass in a slot number, and we're going to pass it over here. Now we need to do the opposite, because if we are checking for a certain slot, for example, slot number 0, and there is a file inside this slot, it means that the slot is not empty. So we need to do the opposite. If this is true, then we return false. And if this is false, we are going to return true, because it has to be the opposite. Because if the file does exist, it means that the slot is not empty. And let's also rename this to be with a capital I. Okay. So now let's close this. And over here, we can finally remove this. And we're going to pass in the slot number inside this method. So slot number. And we also need to do it like that. And we can see that there's this red warning over here because this save game method is not receiving any arguments. So we're going to go inside, and over here we're going to leave this as it is, but we're going to pass in a slot number integer. And we need to also pass in the slot number into this method. So we're going to add a parameter over here, and of course it's going to give us an error because it doesn't exist inside this method. So we're going to click on this one, and over here we're going to add it as a parameter, so int slot number. And we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to keep passing the slot number on because we always want to know what slot are we trying to save into, right? If we want to save into the first slot, the second slot, we are going to have 3 different slots, but you can do the same thing and have 5, 10, or even 20 different slots. But we need to always know the slot number. So we're going to pass in the slot number over here. And now we go into this method. So this is our save game data to JSON file, and we're going to receive an int slot number over here. But now, in order to actually save into the slot number, we're going to change the path over here. So we're going to have this JSON path project, and the same way we did before, plus file name, plus slot number, plus .json. And we can also change this over here so we can see it inside the console. And we also need to change the loading because we want to know what slot are we trying to load from, right? So we need to pass in a slot number each time we want to load the game. Because if we want to load from the first slot, we need to tell it, okay, load the game from slot number 0 or slot number 1 or slot number 2. So we pass in the slot number, and again, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to load from this path. So when we save the game, it's going to save it inside this path, right? And when we load the game, it's going to load it from this path. And the slot number will always change because we pass in a different slot number each time. So if we want to save into slot number 1, it's going to save it into save game 1, right? .json. And it's going to load it from save game 1 JSON. And now that we did all of this for the JSON, we also need to do it for the binary. So we're going to close this, and we're going to do these changes inside the binary section. And now we can see that there is no error over here because we added these parameters. Now we will also go to our, let's see, not this one, saving, loading. Yes, we need to change it over here because when we load the game, we also need to provide the slot number, as we saw over here. Where was it? Over here, right? We added this parameter, so now we also want to do it from this part. So we're going to provide it with a slot number and also here, but the slot number doesn't exist, so we need to pass it over here. And now we also need to add it over here, so we're going to pass it inside the switch. So we also need to pass it inside this load game method. And we also have this start loaded game, so we're also going to pass it over here, and we're also going to pass it over here. And we also want to pass it inside this coroutine. So int slot number and load game from the slot number. And this load game is the load game that we have here. So this way, each time we're going to save into a certain file, we're going to pass in the slot number and it will know where to save the data. And when we want to load the game, we need to provide it with a slot number so it will know from which slot we want to load. Now, if we save this and we go to our menu manager, we have this temp save game that we had before because we were saving the game by pressing on the actual menu and not on these slots. So we don't need this anymore, so we're going to remove it. Before we create the UI for the loading, we just want to see that it works, so we go inside our main menu, and over here we have an error because we need to provide it with a slot number, but instead of sending the slot number and creating all of this, we are not going to do it because we don't want to save it this way. We want to click on the actual submenu and load it from the slots. So for now, we're going to provide it with a hard-coded one, so it's going to load the saved game that is inside the first slot, but this is something temporary just for now, just for testing. Okay, so now before we can test all of this and see if it works, we also want to change this empty text, because if we're going to save something into this slot and then we're going to exit the game and come back, it will become empty again. There will be an actual file saved for the slot, but the text of this button is not going to be saved because we did not save the text. We only saved the file by clicking on this button, but the text inside this button is not saved. So we also want to do this. So we open our save slot script and we create an update method. And inside the update method, we're simply going to check if is slot empty slot number. So if this slot, right, the slot that the script is sitting on, if this slot is empty, then simply change the button text to be empty. But if this slot is not empty, then we can simply say button text, and then we're going to get the information from the PlayerPref. So we learned about PlayerPref a few episodes ago when we saved all our settings, and we're going to use it to save the actual text of this slot. So PlayerPref get string, and we want to get a string for this slot. So slot number and description. So we want to get a string for something that is named slot1 description or slot2 description or slot0 description. So this is just the name of the string that is saved inside PlayerPref. But there's going to be a value inside of it. This is just a way to get this value, right? And we're going to get the value if the slot is not empty. Now, first, before we get the string, we also want to save the string, right, into the PlayerPref. So inside this method over here, we are going to change all of this and save it into a string named description. And then we're going to set button text to be the description, right? So we didn't do anything different. We simply saved all of this into a variable and then we set the variable. So it's exactly what we had before. But now we also want to use this description and save it into the PlayerPref. So PlayerPref set string, and we give the number of this string. So slot number, description, and we also want to provide it with the value, and the value is the actual description. So we are simply saving all of this inside PlayerPref, and this is the name of the string, and this is the value of the string. So this will be the value of the string. So each time we can save it, and then we can load it. Okay. Now we also want to be able to open this submenu. So when we click on the menu canvas over here, and we click on our menu, so let's just close this. Let's open the menu. So now when we click on this save game, we should open this save game menu. So we press on this, let's see, menu, save game button. And over here, we're going to change all of this. So now we do want to turn it on. So runtime only. And we want to be able to open the menu, well, actually close the menu so you can see it, that it's not ticked. So each time we press on this save game button, it's going to close the menu. And we also want to remove this because we don't need this. But we want to open this save game menu. So we're going to drag it inside and we're going to set it to be active. So each time we press on this save game, it's going to open this save game menu, this sub menu, and it's going to close this menu, right? So this is what is going to happen. It's going to close this and it's going to open this. Now we also want to go inside. We want to duplicate this slot 2 times. So the first one will be at the top. The second one will be a bit below it, and the other one will be over here. And now that we have 3 different slots, we can click on these slots and we can rename them. So this will be slot 0, this will be slot 1, and this will be slot 2. Or actually, let's make it simpler. 1, 2, and 3. And now we can click on each one of these slots, and inside the save slot script, we're going to change the slot number. So this will be 1, save slot 2 will be 2, and save slot 3 will be 3. And there's actually no need to have these public because we are getting them from the code. So let's go into the script and just make them private so we don't get confused. Private, and this should also be private. Okay, so we only want to change the slot number. So this will be 1, this will be 2, and this will be 3. And each time we click on this, it will simply take the slot number and it will do all of this by using the slot number. It will check if it's empty, it will save it, it will create this description, it will save the description, and this is the way we're going to save it. Now, the saving should work, but we also want to have the loading submenu. So I'm going to select all of these slots and I'm going to copy them. And I'm going to save this scene and we are going to open the main menu scene. And now we can open the canvas. We can close the main menu. We can open the sub menu of this loading game. And now we're simply going to paste all of these slots inside this load game. And we're going to change the looks of it a bit. And then we're going to change the names of these slots. So it's going to be load slot 1. Now we will click on all of these slots and we're going to remove the save slot script because it's not relevant anymore. And we can also go to the text over here and remove this. So we remove this empty text. And then we're going to select all of these slots and we're going to add a script named load slot. Now this load slot will be a bit similar to the saving slot. We're going to have a public button. We need to use the UI. Okay, so what is going on over here? Again, we have the button, we have the button text, and we have the slot number. And then we get the references inside the awake. Then we check if this slot is empty. If this slot is empty, then simply display nothing. But if there is something inside this slot, then display the description, right? Because in the beginning it will be empty, but if there is something saved inside this slot, we want to display it over here so we know that we can actually load this. Now it gives us this error because this method is not inside the save manager. We created this method inside the save slot. But because the save slot and the load slot both need to use this method, we want to make it more accessible. So we're going to take it out from this save slot script and we're going to place it inside the save manager. So we're going to put it here inside the utility. Okay, and now we don't need to do this because it's already inside the same class. And now if we go back over here, we do need to change this. So we simply say save manager instance, and now it's going to find this thing over here. And yes, we also need to change the protection. So now it will be public. And inside the save slot, it's going to use this method, but not from within the same script. It will simply go to the save manager. And we're going to do the same thing over here. And now because this method is inside the save manager, we can also use it from this load slot. Now we have the same problem with this deselect button. So we're going to take it and copy it from the save slot and paste it into the save manager. And now inside the save slot, we simply need to reference it from the save manager. Again, we have this protection, so public deselect button, and then we're going to do the same thing inside the load slot. So inside the awake, we simply check if there is something saved. If it's empty, then we're going to leave it empty like that. And if there is something saved inside this slot, right, inside the slot number, then we're going to display the description and we're going to get it from the PlayerPref. And we place it inside the update because it can always change, so we want it to change in real time. Now inside the start, we're going to create a non-click on this button, right? So this button, it means each button that this load slot script is on. So it means that it's this button and this button and this button. So we have a non-click listener. So when we click on one of these slots, if this slot is not empty, right? False. If it's not empty, then we're going to load the game from this slot number. And we also want to deselect the button because it's just going to keep selecting the button. It's going to give us different visual bugs. So we start loaded game from this slot, and this is the method we have over here. We're simply loading the scene, and then we start this coroutine, and we go through all of these loading methods. Now, if we go to the main menu, we can also remove all of this because we no longer want to click on the load game button. We want to click on these slots. So this was only for testing. So now we can delete all of this. And we also want to be able to open this submenu. So we have this submenu over here. And actually we need to place these slots inside the submenu. Now let's close this, open the main menu. So when we press on this load game button, we want to enable both of these. So we want to close the main menu and we want to open this load game menu and set it to be active, right? The same way we did with the saving menu. Now the last thing we need to do is create a warning for the player when he tries to override an existing save file. So we're going to save this scene and we will go to the game scene, and inside the save game menu, we are going to expand it. Let's see, save game menu. And inside we're going to simply create some kind of image, something like that. And we're going to set a background. So I'm going to use some kind of UI. And then I'm going to have inside of this image, I'm going to have two buttons and also a title. So Text Mesh Pro. The title will go on top and the buttons will go over here. Okay, so I just created a very simple, very basic UI. This should not be inside, it should be over here. Okay. So we have an image, we have a text, and we have two different buttons. Now we're going to save this and go inside the save slot. And here we're going to have a few more references to the public game object alert UI, button, yes button, and button, no button. Now the alert UI we're going to reference from the inspector. We're simply going to drop it inside, but we don't need to do it for these two buttons. We can find them inside the awake. Okay, so we simply find the reference for the yes button and for the no button. So make sure that these names over here are the same as here. And now we're going to create another method at the bottom. So inside this method, we're simply displaying the alert, and then we create these on-click listeners. So if we press on the yes button, it will actually save the game and it will close the UI. If we press on the no button, it will only close the UI, okay? So now we also want to create this method. And what we're going to place inside is actually all of this data that we created over here. So all of this inside this if statement, we're going to copy it, actually cut it, and place it inside this save game confirmed. And then we're simply going to call this method instead of all of this code. So it's basically the same thing. We simply took it out and we placed it inside a method. So this is cleaner. Now, when the slot is not empty, then it means something is saved inside. We're going to use this display override warning. So when we click on one of these slots, if the slot is empty, it means that we can actually save inside. It will automatically go to this method and it will save the game. If it's not empty and there is already a save that exists inside the slot, it will first ask us if we are sure that we want to override it. So it will display this UI, and only if we actually accept, then it will run this method. And now let's save this and let's go back. So over here, we need to click on the save slot and we need to drag this alert UI, and we need to do it for all of these slots. So alert UI here and here and here. Now we're going to disable this override alert because we don't need to see it. We're also going to disable this save game menu, and we're going to display this menu. But of course, we also want to disable this entire menu because we don't need to see it. And now we are basically done. So let's see if everything is working. So let's close this. And if we go into our assets, we can find this save game over here. Let's delete this. And now let's go into our main menu. And if we click on the save manager, we still want to save into JSON, but it should basically work the same way with the binary. So let's start the game. If we go to the load game menu, we can see that this is empty and nothing is available for loading. So if we go back and we start a new game, we can walk around. Yes, I also disabled the UI so we cannot see the quick slots. So it's something I forgot to do. But let's say we go over here into this field, okay? And now, if I press M and open this menu and I press on the save game menu, it should appear over here. So let's go back. Let's open the menu canvas. And if we open oh yeah, I forgot to set it to be run only. Okay, so this is something I just overlooked. And now we can close this entire menu. We can close the menu canvas, and let's also enable this canvas, okay? Let's start. So new game, everything is working fine. So let's find a spot to save the game so we can know that it's not the beginning of the game. Let's go over here under this tree. Okay. So now I press M, I open this save game menu, and inside we have all of these slots. So if I'm going to press on this first slot, it's going to save it into a file named save game 1, right? So I'm pressing on this, and now we can see that it's saved into save game 1. This is the time, and at the bottom we can see saved game to JSON file, and this is the location. And it saved it into savegame1.json. Now, if we close the game, or if we go back, it doesn't matter. But if we close the game and we go to our assets, and then we refresh our assets, we can find this savegame1 over here. And we have the encrypted data inside. And if we run the game again, and this time we go to the load game, we should see it over here. I'm going to check why we're not seeing it.
A few moments later.
Oh, I know what's wrong. If we open our canvas, load game menu, and we click on these slots, we did not give them any numbers. Okay, so all of them are 0. So the first one should be 1, the second one should be 2, and the third one should be 3. Okay, so this is what we forgot. And we also can make these private, but it's not important right now. So now let's close this. Let's close. Well, actually, we don't need to close this because this is the main menu. Let's save it. So now if we start the game again and we go to this load game submenu, we can see that we have a saved file inside this slot. And now when we click on it, it will load the game. And it took us like 1 second to actually load the game. That's why we can also create some kind of loading screen for these few seconds that our game is being loaded, right? So the player doesn't see this switch. But for now, we can see that it works. And if I'm going to move to another position, I can actually create another save game by saving it into a different slot. So let's go over here, open the save game, but this time we're going to save it over here. And we can see save game 2, we have the different time. And if I close the game and I start the game, we can find the second one over here and we can load the game. So everything is working. Now, of course, inside our game, inside these submenus, there are a lot of things that we can add. For example, we can delete these save games. And that's something that we can usually find in games, an option to delete these. So I'm not going to cover this. If you really want me to, then comment and tell me that you want to do it, and I'm going to show you in another episode. But it's basically very simple. You should simply add some kind of icon with a trash can, and then when you click on it, it will simply ask you if you want to delete this, and then it will simply go to this location. It will delete this file. So this way you can actually delete files, and you can do a lot of things, but these are more advanced things and more specific, and if you want to add them, you should just research about them and learn how to do them. But everything is working at the moment. Now, the saving system is mostly done. You can save, you can load, everything is working. The only thing that we are missing is saving more information, because at this moment, all we are saving is the position of the player and the stats of the player. But what if we pick up something? What, for example, let's find a stone. Let's see. Let's see if we have something. Let's say we have something inside our inventory, right? and we want to save it. This is just for testing, right? In the beginning, we should not have anything. But what if we picked up and crafted ourselves an axe, and then we save the game? We still want to be able to have this axe inside our inventory. And if we picked up some stones and some sticks, we don't want to see them anymore when we load the game, right? All of these things. Otherwise, you can just abuse it and you can keep loading the game and all of these materials will be on the floor. So when we pick up these stones and sticks and then we save the game and load the game, we don't want to see them on the floor, and we do want to see them inside the inventory, because right now, if I'm going to save the game over here and then quit and then load this, it will load the game, but these things will still be on the floor and they will not be inside the inventory. So the next episode will be the last episode for the saving system. I know it's been a few long episodes and I really want to continue to add other things into the game, but I really want to finish all of this. So in the next episode, we're going to learn how to save the content of our inventory, how to make all of these things that we picked up disappear when we load the game, and a few more things. Now, in the future, we're going to add more things into the game. We're going to have quests and we're going to have different things that will also need to be saved. But when we get there, we're going to figure it out. So that's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It will help me a lot. Thank you for watching and see you next time.